Hello and welcome to another episode of MIA Podcast, where we get to explore the topic of will manufacturing ever return to the glory days of the 60s? And for those who are maybe new to the podcast, essentially what we're doing is we bring on fantastic guests, where those who are in manufacturing and those that support manufacturing. So we have with us today a very special guest, Cynthia from Dearin Associates. Welcome, Cynthia.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolute pleasure to have you here. I'm so excited about this one because what Cynthia focuses on is helping businesses make it overseas. So if you're a manufacturer right now, or even if you own your own business and have always had that question in the back of your mind, can we make it overseas? How do we do it? How do we tap? We know we want to tap into certain markets. Is there enough volume there, etc. Cynthia is your person. So I'm going to hand it over to you for a little bit. If you want to just give a little bit of a wrap around your business and your book, especially as well.
Hey, can do. So as you mentioned, I'm the managing director and the founder at Dearin Associates. What we do is we help companies to go global or to scale internationally, if you like, by helping them to create and execute strategies that work. And so the way that we do that is that we start by sitting down with the business owner or the executive team and figuring out what they're trying to get done and why, and really getting some granularity around that. And then we take them through the entire process of creating a strategy. Now, to kind of give you the counterfactual, what most people do when they start selling overseas or scaling is they do it in a really ad hoc way. So people choose what they're going to do on gut feel. Sometimes crazy things happen, like they go on holiday somewhere and fall in love with it and decide they're going to start selling there. I know of a couple of instances where that's happened. Or they get some orders from a particular country and then they say, oh, well, we're getting orders that have come in. This must be where we need to put our focus. And so it's all very kind of free flowing. I don't really like that way of making big strategic business decisions. So I work with people to flip it on its head and to use structure and data to help people make really smart decisions about how they're going to go global, where they're going to sell, who they're going to sell to, how they're going to get their stuff to market, which stuff they're going to sell, and what the messaging is going to be around that. So there are a whole bunch of aspects that we look at, but it's really about helping people to create and put in place a strategy that is going to work, rather than have them try a whole lot of stuff and have it blow up in their face and then they say, wow, that was hard and not much fun and I didn't make any money, never doing that again.
Yeah, I love that approach. Us being marketers as well, we see that on a more simplistic level of, hey, we tried advertising, we didn't get any new sales, advertising doesn't work. And we both know that, there's all elements in business that you need to have a proper approach. So Cynthia, how did you get into your business? What led you to this path of being able to help people make it overseas?
Look, it's a great question. I have been interested in international things since I was a tiny kid. And I've also been interested in business since I was really small. And to give you an example of how I know this, the first business thing I ever did when I was 4 years old, I climbed up the orange tree in our garden and ripped off all the oranges. I think they were pretty sour. And I said to my parents, I am going to sell these oranges down at the front gate. And they went, okay, good luck. And they set me up with my little table and chair and gave me a pitying look because, of course, they didn't think anybody would buy them. But, because when you're 5 and cute and you have a sign that says oranges, people want to buy them. So I came back, an hour or two later with $5, which in 1982 for a 5-year-old was quite a lot of money. And I also had this interest in international stuff. And I think where I've arrived today is kind of a combination of those two things. But it's really interesting. I mean, I didn't get here in a straight line, that's for sure. I didn't suddenly leave school and say, hey, I'm going to found this business. I'm a lawyer by training. What I really wanted to do at the time that I was studying was to be an Australian diplomat. So I did a degree in international studies and law. I applied to foreign affairs and trade and I got into that as a grad. I did 5 years there. I thought I'd be going to France or to Japan because those were the languages I spoke, but I got told, you have language aptitude, you will be studying Arabic and going to the Middle East. which was a little bit scary for me, but went off and did that. Then I crossed over to the dark side and became a management consultant. I spent a number of years bouncing around the Middle East. I'd been in the UAE and in Egypt as a diplomat, but I then went and spent 4 years in Iraq and Jordan and some other Middle Eastern countries as a management consultant. Came back to Australia in 2010 and ran an industry association. And then in 2013, I wasn't super happy in that job, and it was actually quite difficult coming back to Australia after all this international experience. So by that time, I'd lived and worked in France, I'd lived and worked in London, I'd lived and worked all over the Middle East, I'd spent significant time in the States, and I came back to Australia and I had a job, but I didn't really seem to fit anywhere and nobody knew what to do with me. And I remembered that I'd said to myself a while back, by the time I'm 35, I'll have my own business. I was like, well, that's about now. I think I'll get started with this. And that's really how it happened, to be honest. And when I started, we were heavily focused on Middle East things because that's where I'd spent 10 years, right? So I knew that space back to front. But as time has gone on, and it's about 10 years now since I started the company, what we have done is really evolved over time from this focus on the Middle East to now a focus on strategy and using data to decide what we should do. So we do some work on the Middle East still, but it's no longer the bulk of what we do. And that's us.
Yeah, look, interesting that you, with that focus on the Middle East, so we're involved in a couple of networking groups that are starting to do trade with Saudi. So Saudi's shifting from, we're an oil-based country to we're a manufacturing powerhouse. Obviously, they've got a huge investment in sport and really shifting that global view of how they identify as a country as well. Now, I know I'm shifting from our normal format, but let's run with it. So my business partner Bernard, we just came back from over there, and he said it was incredibly interesting to look at that country as a whole, because they've learned from places like Dubai and things like that. They've got a stupendous amount of money. They've got a stupendous amount of opportunity in terms of the infrastructure they're building there, but not necessarily the resources to support it. So Bernard was saying, you've got the population who have essentially non-skilled to some level, being put into positions where they do require a certain level of skill, and then they're opening their doors for international players to come on board. Now, I know you don't focus specifically on Middle East anymore, but I guess that would be an example of sort of where you would look at that position and go, is now the right time to start at least investing time and relationships, or is it ever going to work? I guess that would be something that you would look at as well.
Absolutely. And look, I've got a couple of clients who are doing Saudi at the moment. And to be honest, there's been this kind of opportunity for a while, but it's really only become publicly known in the last few years, because there has been this generational shift in leadership in the Saudi royal family, and the new generation has really said, look, we want to promote and I guess, publicize Saudi in a different way. And so the way that it's working, the way that it is developing is changing radically, and it's changing quite rapidly as well. And so, your business partner's analysis is spot on. There's a lot of money, there's a lot to be done, but there's a real gap in capacity at a lot of levels to do the things that need to be done to move these projects forward. And it's across the spectrum. So, it's at infrastructure and construction at one end, right the way through to marketing and photography at the other.
Yeah. So interesting trip we just had. Now, did you want to? I would invite you to just share a few words about your book, Business Beyond Borders. Tell us a little bit about that as well, please.
So that is the book, Business Beyond Borders. I basically wrote this because as I've gone on this journey of building a company that helps people to go global, I like to read pretty widely, and I'm always looking for where can I find more and more great resources that I can absorb and that I can give to people. And I found there was not a whole lot of stuff in this space. I could find kind of books on topics that were all spread all over the place. And I said, I think I better write something to help people understand, how do you do this? What's the way to think about and do this process end to end? And so the book is really the method. It's the blueprint for the methodology that we use in the company inside Dearin Associates to help companies go global, either to sell internationally or to sell and then set up overseas, depending on where they are in that trajectory. And so what it does is it takes you through 16 chapters, starting from the general and thinking about, well, why are you actually doing this and what do you want to get done, down to the specific in terms of, I need to think about foreign exchange. I wonder how I do that. Or, I've got to build a global team. What are some of the things that I need to think about? And so it's kind of a high-level walkthrough of all the things that you need to keep in mind as you're going to take your business global.
Yeah.
And you can get it on Amazon. It comes as a Kindle, comes as a paperback. I think you can buy it pretty much anywhere in the world now, even as a print on demand, which is pretty cool because I got very sick of posting books to like America and Austria and places. But you can also order hard copies here in Australia off our website if you want one.
Has it been converted to an audiobook yet, or is that still in the pipeline?
No, I've had a few requests for it and people saying, can you read this book? I could, but I love to write, but I don't know that I really want to put myself through reading it, because by the time I finished the manuscript, I was like, I'm ready not to see this again for a while. Maybe I should investigate that. I have had a few people say, I would listen to this if it were an audiobook, but no, I haven't done it yet.
Okay. Stay tuned. So let's focus at the current market situation, opportunities for Australian business, and in particular Australian manufacturing as well. So part of the trigger of this podcast was this whole thing of Australian manufacturing of having a bit of resurgence again. Super quick story. My dad was involved in manufacturing for many years. He was always like, he saw the decline. He was in there in the 60s. He was actually one of our guests quite a while ago, and he's seen the gradual decline in manufacturing. And he's always said Australia has always had an opportunity for various reasons. It's always been in decline, but we've seen this little bit of a J at the moment where it's starting to incline again, and various reasons. Look, I would love to open the doors and just have, from your perspective, what opportunities have closed as a result of COVID, if any? And secondly, what opportunities have opened that maybe weren't there before?
It's a great question. Look, I can't think of as many that have closed as a result of COVID. So, I mean, obviously there are the ones that everybody knows about that have kind of gone, well, off the boil is probably an understatement, that have died away over the years, like car manufacturing and so forth. And we have seen some industries kind of grind to a bit of a halt. But I think if you look at it on balance, COVID has been a huge shot in the arm for Australian manufacturing, because people have realized that while the idea of having this completely globalized supply chain is a great idea, and when it works well, it's fantastic, they've had a real-time example of what happens when suddenly the supply chain breaks. And you cannot get the semiconductor chips. They're stuck in the port of Shanghai for months on end, or they didn't even make it to the port of Shanghai because somebody who makes them or packs them in a box got sick or got stuck in a lockdown somewhere in China, and the whole thing ground to a halt. So I think it's taken a lot of the shine off the idea of the global supply chain. So we've spent, 15 or 20 years talking about global supply chains and unbundling, and how we can now split up all the things that used to have to be done in one place and spread them out all around the world in a cost-effective manner, and it will be just in time. It will still work wonderfully. And we've seen over the last 3 years that all just fall apart. And so while I don't want to say, well, global supply chains are dead, because I don't believe that, I think what it has done is it's got people focused on the risk of a global supply chain. And it's got people really thinking we should reshore some of our manufacturing. And look, it's not just COVID, by the way. I think the geopolitical tension with China has also contributed to that very heavily. So I think if you'd seen COVID fade out and relations with China were what they were, say, 5 years ago, you wouldn't have seen manufacturing come back on shore to such an extent. But it's this combination of the mechanics of the supply chain breaking and then people being very fearful of what if something goes wrong with China. So, I mean, I was even speaking to somebody earlier this week who is exploring other manufacturing options and has reshored some of their work and put in automated robotics into their factory in regional New South Wales for this reason, because they said we need a hedge against the situation with China. We're worried that it's going to deteriorate. And so I think there are some, I think one of the really important things here is it's put the focus of government back on manufacturing. You know, you will have seen all the modern manufacturing grants and the stimulus packages and things coming back and being ramped up. But I think, it seems to me that manufacturing was very neglected and sort of unloved for a long time. And the narrative was all about services. Australia is a great services industry. Services make up 70% of the economy. And now as things have changed so dramatically, there's been this kind of snapback and people have gone, actually, we probably still need to be manufacturing. And I think you still have issues around high cost of manufacture and high labor costs. But I mean, there are quite a few pretty solid examples around now of where companies using robotic technology have been able to manufacture parts less expensively in places like the UK or Australia than they could having them manufactured in China and then shipped across the world. So that's some of the opportunity that I see. In terms of particular sectors, I think the places where I see those opportunities are everything from insulated supply chain, called supply chain packaging, to soil remediation and industrial waste products, to height adjustable sinks for hospitals, to hospital beds of different kinds, to the world's first patented motorcycle helmet. I'm reeling you off a list of clients that come to mind at this point, to high-end lighting.
Tell me more about the beds. That's fascinating.
Well, the company I'm thinking of makes hospital beds that function like a hospital bed tilts and does all these fancy things. Because if you are really sick and you've just had surgery and you get put in a normal bed and you're suddenly lying flat or just propped up on pillows, it's excruciating, right? Because you're wounded. And so they put you on a hospital bed and they tilt it. It's beds like that, but they look good. They look like a bed that you would put in your own house.
Wow.
So they're functional, but they're also beautiful, and they make pediatric beds for kids and stuff. And it's awesome, and it's based in regional New South Wales. So
these are the stories that I've been itching to get out to our listeners as well. What's their name?
The name is CareMed, CAREMED, Ulrich, new word, ALRICK. We can chat after the show, and I can hook you up if you like.
We'll put them in the show notes as well. Yeah, because these are fascinating. Because traditionally everyone knows the Hills Hoist, Victor lawnmower, we invented Wi-Fi and all that sort of stuff. But there's new stories coming out, and this is what I find exciting about where manufacturing is right now, and especially the modern manufacturing initiative and all that. Like there's an interesting new mix of what we would say the Gen 4 of manufacturing, and there's space, aeronautics, all that, which we had never really tapped into that much before. But then there's what I would say more traditional types of manufacturing that are having a resurgence as well.
What I think is so exciting is that all of the companies I've just mentioned to you are manufacturing at least, with a couple of exceptions, at least part of their product is being made here. And all of them, without exception, which is why I'm working with them, all of them are looking to go international or already on that trajectory.
That's really exciting. Yeah, I love that. And like I said, these are the stories we want to get out there to our listeners as well. Now, was there anything else that you wanted to add in terms of what are the opportunities? I mean, from our perspective, just before you do answer, we look at there is the rising. One of our biggest challenges, like you said, is the increased cost of manufacture in Australia traditionally. Traditionally in the last probably 20, 30 years in comparison to to other countries. But a lot of manufacturers we're speaking to as well are saying that the marketplace is also having a shift because we are known for quality.
Yeah.
And from a sustainability point of view, and also probably from a, what would say is probably, social thinking around this has shifted, but also from a branding point of view. So if you think of, you're a hospital, do we have the boring old beds, or are we more of a VIP type hospital that has these cool beds manufactured in Australia? There's a lot that's shifting around this as well, where our increased cost is no barrier anymore.
Well, look, I think that Australia, because we're a high cost market, and it's always going to cost more than it is to produce our stuff somewhere like Vietnam or China or practically anywhere else. I think, and because our volumes are usually not enormous, we need to be encouraging our manufacturers to pitch themselves as premium. It needs to be about brand value, whether you are making whiskey or hospital beds or industrial spill kits or patented smart helmets. It's all going to be about brand value and premium product rather than, hey, we're the cheapest at this. I mean, if you can be price competitive, and I know some of the companies I've mentioned can be, that's great. But I would always be wanting to see people pitch themselves as something premium, not the ordinary thing. I think in terms of for certain sectors, particularly, anything in that ESG space, I think the brand Australia and the kind of green Australia image is also really important and still really powerful and resonates really well. Look, in terms of where the opportunities are, they are everywhere. And part of that is just by virtue of the fact that the absolute maximum number of people you can ever sell to in Australia, even if you sell toothpaste, which everybody needs, is 25 million. So if you sell toothpaste or toilet paper, you can hit a maximum of 25 million people, and most people's products are nowhere near as general as that. And so, your marketplace is small. There's always going to be somewhere where the market's emerging and booming. And I look at it and I think, one of the great reasons for selling is obviously 99% of the people you could sell to are out there, not in here. But another one is it's a hedge, right? And look, I've got a whole huge number of reasons why you should expand, but I think, it's a hedge. When there's a downturn at home, if you're operating in a market that's going well, you don't have to go right down with the market. You might go down at home, but your international sales can stay steady or increase. There are economies of scale. I mean, you can be a manufacturer, but you could have some of your manufacturing done here, and you could have components. Some of my clients have components made offshore and assembled here. So there are still ways that you can, benefit from global supply chains and the economies of scale and lower cost bits and pieces, and you can bring it back here and you can put it together and you can sell it out there, or you can have the concept, you can have designed in Australia, but still made somewhere else. You can make the supply chain work and have it sold offshore. I mean, I was looking at some face wash a couple of days ago, and it said designed in the UK with love. So it's face wash that is branded UK. I didn't actually check to see where it was made, but it's made somewhere else. So I think what I'm saying is there are lots and lots of opportunities out there, and there are also lots of opportunities to approach them, and to grasp them, to make the most of them. One quick last example on this: somebody got in touch with me yesterday and said, we make spiral staircases, but we think that they're too big to sell overseas, so we've never looked at it. Do you really think we can do this? And I'm thinking, well, I mean, a spiral staircase is quite large, but it's not, we ship much larger things around the world. And the example I gave to you a few minutes ago, John, was tunnel boring machines. There are huge tunnels being dug here in Sydney at the moment. A tunnel boring machine is like the size of a house, and it comes in on a big boat and somebody pays for that. Okay, a spiral staircase is not at the same price point, but if you can find a customer who wants a premium spiral staircase and they're in a country where there's plenty of disposable income and they want your brand, you can factor in the price of shipping that spiral staircase overseas to them. Or alternatively, as you go on, if you can see that there's demand, you can move your part of your manufacturing closer to where the supply, to where the base is, the demand base is your market, and you can license it. You can manufacture it under license there. You can have part of your operation selling internationally, even though your entire thing is not manufactured and shipped from here. So lots of ways to cut up the pie.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I just want to reiterate what you said before. Like, I think traditionally, Australian manufacturing, from what we have seen, is very, I would say, like humble. We don't like to shout out and sort of say how good we are. You speak to everyone around the world, and they're like, "Oh, Australian manufacturing is known for quality." I would say we're quite on par with, say, something like Germany, those countries that pride itself on quality. But you're absolutely right that people
significantly less expensive than German products in the same sphere.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And they know they can, they can set the price point correct, based on what it takes to manufacture. But I think it's also just having that mindset shift as well. For Australian manufacturers to be willing to take a leap of faith, and say how good we are to tap into world markets. You've got people like yourself to be able to handhold you. You don't have to do it yourself and take all the risk yourself. You can be strategic about how you go out there, and how you go to market, how you approach, who you approach, the whole, all that part of it. But just leading back to that mind shift of like, let's look at bigger markets. Let's step outside of our own backyard and be proud of what we do.
And look, it's not the only thing that gets me out of bed every day. I have 2 kids and a husband and a Burmese cat, so there are lots of things. But professionally, seeing the opportunity for people to do this and to go global, that is why I get out of bed every day, because I am all in favor of digging up rocks from the ground and selling them overseas, but I don't want that to be the only thing that we do. And I see so much possibility, and I see a lot of wasted opportunity. It kind of gets me a bit when we're shipping iron ore offshore to get turned into steel, and that's being sold back to us. And let's not get into a complicated debate about whether it's actually economical to make steel here. But what I'm saying is there are so many opportunities for our stuff to go and reach a bigger market, and the impact of that can be far-reaching, if depending on what the product is. I have one client who makes cold supply chain insulated packaging out of sheep wool, out of waste sheep wool. They have been approached by a partner overseas who has seen this product and said, in our country, infant mortality is really high because the population is poor and babies die of cold, basically. If we could take this product that you use to ship meat and seafood and medicine in, and we could make it into sleeping bags for kids at the cost of, a few cents or a couple of dollars per cover, we could actually make a significant difference to reducing infant mortality in our country. I mean, that blows my mind. So the opportunity to actually change other people's lives is huge. The opportunity to benefit the community around you by creating jobs, think about regional areas in particular, that's huge. And the ability for you to really change your own life and impact the lives of the people around you is also huge. So, I get excited about
that. Yeah, absolutely. Now, look, my next question was going to be, are there businesses that you've come across which are more likely to succeed overseas? What's your response to that question?
Look, I think there are a range of variables. Okay, so all right, if you make escalators and the freight cost is going through the roof, it's going to be harder than if and it's very competitive, than if you sell something that is new, sort of brand new or cutting edge, and there's not as much competition in the market. So that is a very generic answer. I'm thinking, for example, I have a client that makes the world's first patented motorcycle helmet, and their first international purchase order that they got from the States a couple of months ago was like a $1.6 million purchase order. They are going to have no trouble getting fraction for that overseas. I mean, they will have other challenges. They'll, the production piece obviously will bring in complexities because there's going to be volume, and that's all going to have to get scaled up. But for them, it's new, it's cutting edge, it's sexy. Everybody in the community that they're part of wants one of those. That's going to be really easy. I think if you sell something that's not differentiated, so if you sell widgets for $5 a widget, and widgets can be made in China for 5 cents, and it's apples and apples, you're going to have a really hard time. So what I'm saying here is you will do better on one hand if you are different, if it's cutting edge, if it's interesting, if it's standout or new, or just it's something a bit out of the box. It's not just a commodity. And then obviously there are a whole bunch of variables. So companies that are bad at systems are going to struggle. You can have the best product in the world, but if your finances are all over the place, if your team doesn't know what to do when without you supervising them, if you don't have marketing in place where you can track your leads and your metrics and your cost per customer acquisition and the length of the sale and all that stuff, you aren't going to be able to do it, because as you scale, if you have chaos to start with, what happens is you just scale chaos. So that's looking at it from an internal point of view. I think companies that are too over optimistic and just kind of go off and try random things and open loops all the time are not going to do well. They will spontaneously self-combust because there's just too much stuff going on. But also companies that are so conservative that they don't want to take any risk are also going to struggle because they won't try. They'll get stopped by fear. So I've just given you a lot of different variables in terms of, what will and won't work. But let me put it this way. If I could have the ideal client company that was going to go overseas and make a huge success of it, they would have a really great and interesting product with a great brand story around it. They'd have some money to invest. They'd have the right approach to risks. So they would be prepared to take risks where they could kind of quantify the risk and make a decision based on some kind of data. And they would be good on systems and super organized. It's really hard to find those companies. Most companies have at least one of those things missing, but that's the kind of company that's going to do well, where it's already working pretty well and everything is organized and the product's good. And then when you've got all that stuff working well and the company's already making money at home, taking it international is much, much easier because you've got a smaller set of things to deal with. Part of the problem with international is that as you open each market, the volume of work increases. And if you've got, as I said, if you've got problems internally and you go to scale, you just scale chaos.
Yeah. It's like marriages that aren't going so well, and it's like, hey, let's have a kid to solve the marriage. It's going to amplify all the issues.
No.
Anyway, that was a little bit off topic. One of the questions we did explore just before we came on the podcast as well was this whole thing of how would you, so us as a marketing agency, we love supporting manufacturing to help them, polish up how they go to market. How would you say you differ to say what we do? Because some people are like, oh, we just got to make ourselves look good and we're ready to go overseas.
No, look, it's totally different. So we are all about strategy, right? And so you guys are the kind of company that we would refer somebody to. So if we think about it in its most simple form, I could go into a lot more detail. Let me try and keep it simple. Just imagine in your head a pyramid, right? Like a triangle. And the triangle has 6 layers going up it. We are helping people to figure out which market should I be selling to. That's on the bottom layer of the pyramid. Then we're helping them to think about who is my ideal international client. So this is getting very clear on that ideal avatar who we love, who we can help and who can pay us, and really knowing what that target market is. Then we're thinking about what is my winning offer. So you might have 20 products that you make at your factory, and the temptation is that you want to go out and sell everything at once. But to do that globally, that opens up a huge amount of risk, right? Because you have to put a lot of energy and investment in a lot of different directions. So we want to help you come up with a winning offer, which is to think through, well, I know who I want to sell to, which of our products is going to go best, and we start with that. Then we want to think about what's the best channel for you to get your stuff to market. Is it a distributor? Is it going to be e-commerce? Is it going to be partnerships? Is it direct sales? How is that going to work? Then we want to think about your piece, which we call powerful promotions, and we are getting people to think through, all right, well, which are the best channels likely to be given the market that I'm going to, given the ideal client, given the winning offer, where should we be focusing? And then after that, we would look at, well, what's your financial game plan? So what do you project sales to be? What are your costs going to be? How much extra money will we need to make this international thing happen? Because often there's going to be an investment at the start. Well, not often, pretty much always. Do we have the cash to fund that? If we don't, where can we get it? How can we get it? So generally speaking, at the most simple level, those are the kinds of things we're looking at. And when it comes to the marketing, we are doing that piece to help people figure things out. And we give people strategies and tools, but we're not an agency. So what will happen is, I had a call just before we got on this show today with somebody who said, and this person is a founder, she said, I'm still doing all of the digital and e-com and marketing stuff. And I've been doing it for years, and I think I'm on the point of burning out. And I said to her, well, look, you need to go, and you've either got to get somebody in-house to take this away from it, or you have to go to an agency to do this. And that's where we would get a group like yours in to say, okay, we have a manufacturing client. They're using these channels, they want to do these channels, and roughly it's this strategy, and they have not got the snowball's chance in hell of doing it because they don't understand the mechanics. Can you please help them to put that together, to put together the paid and organic social strategies, the landing pages, the funnels, all the metrics to go with it, and then to be walking alongside them and doing it and measuring it with them and making it happen so they can go off and do what they know how to do, which is manufacture awesome stuff.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And like one of the points you mentioned was the that financial planning side of it, sales forecasting, etc. Do you help them? Say they've had a bit of a go at it. Do you help them? Really, you said you've got a lot of data you can tap into. Do you help them really refine those strategies as well?
We don't specifically do sales forecasting, but we do management accounts, so dashboard reporting. So we're for the clients who want it, we're sitting down with them every month, and they've either sent us data or they've given us permission to suck it out of their their Xero or their MyOb. And essentially it's kind of like a stripped back version of what you would find in an ASX listed company. It's on a couple of pages, and it basically gives you readouts across different areas of the business. And then our chartered accountant sits with our clients and goes through, okay, well, what are the actionable steps that we can take? We need to get COGS down by 5%. If we get COGS down by 5%, here's what we'll do to EBIT. Here's what we'll do to cash in the bank. All right, where can we now find 5% of savings? Or, all right, you want to sell these 10 products overseas, but we know that they're not all as profitable. Let's do a gross margin analysis and kind of tee up which ones are most profitable with which ones we think are going to sell best, and let's sell those ones. And look, I think my favorite story about this part of our business is I had a client who came to me a couple of years ago who was on, 7 or 8% profitability, turning over a couple of $1 million, a manufacturer, kind of owing money everywhere, owing money to the bank and the tax department and to the ATO, to themselves. And we sat down, we did this process every single month for a year. We got to the end of the year and they'd paid off all their debt. They'd put, at least $500,000 back into the business, which is not too bad off $2 million a year, plus paying off all the debt. They'd paid themselves back. They'd paid off all the people they owed money to, and they rang up and said, hey, we have all this spare money. Can you advise on a short-term investment? And I went, absolutely not. I know nothing about that whatsoever, but I can definitely refer you on to somebody. So that's the kind of thing we can do. And that's really about just getting people focused on the right stuff.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And look, I dare say there's some listeners out there that are probably itching to hear the answer to my next question. How do people find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. Cynthia Dearin, just my name. I think I'm the only one because it's a bit of a weird name. I'm also on Facebook. You can find me there, but LinkedIn is my main platform. Otherwise, you are more than welcome to go to our website, which is DearinAssociates.com. John, you might put a link in the show notes so people can look there. But those are the best ways. So, if you have a question, send me a note on LinkedIn. That's fast. Say that you heard me chatting on this podcast so I can let John know. And let's have a chat. See what you're trying to do and whether there's something we can do to help.
Yeah, perfect. Now we're getting at the point of the podcast where it is time, or almost time to wrap up. Was there anything else you wanted to share with our listeners from your perspective?
I just want to say, don't be afraid. Opportunities are out there. Don't be afraid, but don't be foolish. Do your research. Make informed decisions, not ones that just are based on which way the wind is blowing or whether you had your Weet-Bix this morning. And be patient, because it does take quite a while to develop an international business. I usually say to people, it's a minimum of 3 years. So, if you're going to do it, but just be prepared to commit for a bit of time. But look, it's an awesome journey, and it's a really exciting journey. And when it works well, it's just like magic and one of the best things you can do.
Yeah, great. Now, I have to say a very, very special thank you to Cynthia, because I feel like your business is like the I don't know what word it is, but you're the glue that holds like all of what all the angles that we've talked in our show previously together, and you're the person that looks across the whole picture. So I think we could probably have you on for 6 hours straight, but there's so many angles we could explore. But thank you very, very, very much for jumping on and sharing probably 1% of your knowledge. And I would encourage all of our listeners to at minimum check out your book, but definitely get in contact and reach out on LinkedIn and follow Cynthia as well, because your wealth of knowledge.
Hey, huge pleasure. Thanks for having me in to chat.
Perfect. Well, thank you again to our listeners, watchers. Thank you very much for jumping on. Absolute pleasure to have you on, Cynthia. And we will see you in our next MIA, or listen to you in our next MIA podcast. Thanks very much.